Hello and welcome to Squeaky Beepers, a podcast about birds by a bird nerd. My name is Kaylee, and this is the first episode titled Why I Love Birds. Before we get started, I'm going to explain, since this is new, what this podcast is all about. Like I said, it's a podcast about birds by a bird nerd. So we will, every episode, either discuss a specific species of birds, maybe like corvids, or like that'd be a family, or maybe just a singular bird, like chickadees. I don't know. It depends. It's mostly going to be like what I want to talk about or what people would ask. But then we're also going to talk about maybe like conservation efforts or like what to do and what not to do if you're interested in putting up backyard bird feeders. So it's going to be all over the place, nothing too like strict, and people are always welcome to leave suggestions. I have a couple ideas in mind, but for this first episode, we're just going to talk about like why I think birds are just so great, and maybe why you should at least appreciate birds and what they do. So, like I said, my name is Kaylee, and I'm a bird owner. I own two little parakeets named Kieran and Griffin. I've had them for about 2 years, but I've loved birds for, I think, most of my life, but it wasn't really until almost like 3 or 4 years ago when I started going to university that I really realized how much I enjoyed birds and that I wanted it to be part of my life and hopefully part of my career. So I just went to school for not Parks and Recreation, but Recreation Resource Management, and hoping to work in the park system. And obviously there's birds everywhere. So I hope maybe while I'm working there to learn more about birds and help share with people, since birding is a really big non-consumptive form of recreation. And we'll probably talk about that in a different episode. But it's like a great opportunity for me to see birds and to learn about conservation efforts. Like currently I am stationed out on the North Spit with the BLM of Oregon, working for conservation with the Western Snowy Plover, which by the end of my 6 months, we're definitely going to have an episode and talk about that. I guess like, I don't know what it is about birds that I really like. Visually, it's hard not to like birds. I feel they have little beady eyes and are usually like fat and round when they're all puffed up. But there's a lot of species that are just odd to look at, like a lot of shorebirds. Like if you ever look at an albatross, they have very interesting beaks, and the sooty shearwater has a very interesting nasal passage. Or you look at something like a turkey vulture who has a bald head, and you would kind of be put off by some of these birds. But the more you look at them and the more you realize what their lives are like, and what function they perform in an ecosystem, even the ugliest bird is hard not to love. Like the turkey vulture, we're going to have a whole episode on turkey vultures, or just vultures in general, because they are a species of bird that is very vilified and generally just hated or just overlooked, despite the fact they perform some of the most important functions, not just for the ecosystem, but for human society, that if they were gone, we would be in a lot of trouble. But that will be a different episode, obviously. But yeah, birds are just, it's looking into them, it's amazing how intelligent they are too. We're going to have an episode hopefully later on corvids. So that's the ravens, the crows, your jays, and they're my favorite family of birds. I have a raven tattoo on my arm because ravens are my absolute favorite bird, and their intelligence is just stunning. They have their own language, and that's something we're going to talk about too. And it's hard not to be amazed by these creatures. Obviously some people keep them as pets, not ravens, but the parrot family. I forget exactly what that scientific name is, but people keep parrots, finches, and canaries are in their own family. And toucans, which I did not realize were not parrots until recently, but they are their own family, but they do live in like the rainforest around other parrots. So people do own those. I did not know that. There is a person on YouTube named Toucan TV who he owns toucans, and I was like, oh my god, you can own a toucan? And yeah, you can own those. They're amazing. It's just wild to think you can own one of those dudes, but again, it's weird to think you can own something like a cockatoo, that those things live to be 70 plus years, and some of them have the intelligence, or they all have the intelligence of a toddler. And then you get up to the African gray, who lives 90 plus years and has the intelligence of, like, I think it's up to like a first grader. They are very cognitive bird, and it's kind of scary to think that people own these guys. So parrots are just, it's interesting that people own these very intelligent, very socially complex animals. Me, myself, I own 2 parakeets. They were my first birds, and I've always wanted to own birds, and I've actually I remember as a child wanting to own parakeets. It's definitely been a rude awakening. It's not as glamorous as it seems, or it's my fault too for purchasing them from like a pet store, you know, Petco, so they are a little hand shy, but it's very rewarding to see these guys warm up to me over the last 2 years. They're very different birds than they were 2 years ago, and it's adorable to see. They each have their own personalities, and it is an honor to share my home with them and to be a bird parent. But I know owning birds is not for everybody, and we will have an episode on the deciding if owning a bird is right for you. But I just wanted to talk about it shortly because there's a reason to appreciate them, is that you can bring them into your own home and have these very social and emotional complex relationships with them, and that's amazing. Some of them can be very affectionate, but it is very different than owning a dog. But there's something to appreciate there with birds, is that we can have these really close relationships, but not everybody's down for that. There's other ways to appreciate these guys, and from afar. Birding is such a wonderful way to recreate. It gets you obviously out of the house, and because birds are regional, it gets you to explore really neat places. Like right now, I'm on the coast and I'm seeing birds you can't see inland, like all the gulls, all the cormorants. I saw bald eagles the other day. I'm seeing barn swallows that I didn't know I could see on the coast, and it's been really interesting to learn like their range and where they habitate. Birding can be an awesome way to get you outside and exploring. Like, you don't have to go that far. If you've got a natural area in your city, there are going to be birds. You can just sit in your backyard and there's going to be birds. And I like having that non-personal relationship with birds too, just watching them and seeing how they interact with each other, how they live their lives. I am the person who, if I see a pigeon, it's a good day. It doesn't matter how unique the bird is. And I think if you're a lover of birds, that's how it should be. You should just be happy to see somebody. That's a cool way to dual recreate, going on hikes, sightseeing, while looking for birds, or just having your eye open for birds. It doesn't have to be very time consuming. It can be very casual. There are some people who go real crazy into bird watching. There's a movie called The Big Year with Jack Black and Owen Wilson and Steve Martin, I believe, who show the more chaotic, competitive side of birding and how it literally destroys people's lives. It's crazy how in depth people will get with bird watching. And I'm just like, if I go on a walk and I see a bird, hell yeah. I ain't driving across the country in a day to go see something, even if it's, oh my god, we haven't seen one of these dudes in like a year in this place, or like 10 years or whatever. This is really rare. I'm not spending that money. I will take my opportunities as I get them. But yeah, so more on why you should love birds, or just appreciate. Love's a really strong word for some people. Not everybody is down with birds, and I get that. But there's a bird for everybody. Even if you're not super into birds, there's gonna be a bird that just touches you. And for me, that was the raven. And when I worked with Chintimony Wildlife Center or Rehab Center, in Corvallis, Oregon, I met an older lady in a retirement center who told me about this blue heron that hung out in front of her window somewhere. Like, it wasn't at her window, but was in a good distance that she could still see it. And just something about that bird, just having it there, she suddenly had a connection with that bird by just seeing it. And it touched her. Just having this hands-on experience or relationship with this animal, she was still, just by viewing it and it being there like every morning, touched her. So just the simplest little thing, just seeing a chickadee in your backyard, that's it. Like, there's a bird for you, and somehow it will touch you. Here are, how many birds are in the world? I'm gonna Google that really quick. There are over 10,000 species, with more than 90% of the global species diversity estimated to not have been described. So there's a bird for you, even if it's just like, I love their plumage. Hey, that's a start, and to get you on the road to maybe looking them up and understanding their conservation status and just learning something about nature. Like, that's a win for me. There are a lot of families too. Like, out of those 10,000 species, there are several families. Like I mentioned, the corvids. I don't remember exactly their scientific name, but there's a family that chickadees are in that's called the tit family. So you got the bush tit, the mouse tit, the great tit, and then you have chickadees. And I don't know the story behind that. Maybe that'll have to be an episode where we talk about, why are these birds called tits? Like, what does that mean? But I just think that's funny. There's a lot of families, and there's groups of birds too that we categorize like pelagic species. And that means birds that spend more than like half their life. So like the albatross spends 90% of its life on the open sea and only comes back to have its chicks. So that's a pelagic species that spends their life offshore, because there is shore birds like your pelicans and your seagulls. They're not spending their life out on the ocean. But there's just like families upon families upon families of birds, each with their own adaptations and lifestyles, which I find just amazing that there are 10,000 plus species of birds on this planet, and they all are doing something different. What can birds do for us? Birds are amazing just by existing, in my opinion, but birds do have, luckily for us, function that helps support our lives. Like, if you think of pollinators, hummingbirds are huge pollinators. They don't do nearly as much as bees, and if we lose the bees, we're screwed, because birds just can't match the numbers of population size as an insect. But they are pollinators, and they're really important for that. Like I mentioned, kind of alluded to earlier about the turkey vulture. We know they're scavengers and they eat dead things. They help clean up the roadkill, help remove those like disease from the populations. And something we'll have to go more in depth to, but turkey vultures, or vultures in general, are immune to botulism and anthrax, and are very important in third world countries like Africa, where anthrax is just in the soil, and helping to prevent anthrax spreads in the human population. And we'll definitely have to go in depth with that, because that was something I did not know until working with turkey vultures at Chintimony Wildlife Center. And I don't think people really understand how important they are, and just like how vilified they are. What's another good bird? Seabirds just in general are really good indicators of beach health, or just like coastline health. I will be participating on Memorial Weekend. This, it's called COAST. I forget what it stands for, but it's pretty much where you go. It's the citizen science, so anybody can participate in this, and it's where non-scientists, so citizens, people who don't have a science background, can go out and help collect data for scientists. So, like, there's the backyard bird count is one of them too, where you just count the species that you see and then help by delivering that information, data to scientists who can then use it and make speculations about bird populations and global health. So these seabirds, we're finding dead, washed up birds on the shore and measuring and taking, what do they look like? What can we speculate what their death was, and determining how healthy this beach is, because if we're seeing like an influx in death, there's probably something wrong. If these birds are covered in oil and got washed up onto the beach, there must be an oil breach somewhere, and something for us to look out, especially because on our beach, on the North Spit, it's Western Snowy Plover Conservation Area, so if something's happening on our beaches, we want to know. But just in general, they're a good indicator of ecosystem health. Birds are, I can't remember which species it is, the marbled murrelet, who is listed as critically endangered, has been described as the canary in the coal mine for coastal bird health, or like coastal ecosystem health, because if they're not there anymore, there's obviously something wrong. And we can use that information to then begin looking for, well, is it human impact? What's going on? Why is the area changing? What do we need to do to preserve this habitat for this species and other species that depend on this ecosystem as well? So, and that's important for us too. Just having these areas, and we can never really put worth on another animal. So some people, like, a totally different topic, but like, why should we save endangered species? It's like, 'cause we can't know how this will affect us in the long run. And also, that's just a species we can never get back, and lowers the biodiversity of an area and of our planet. It's a really complex topic and weirdly controversial why we're putting efforts into this, but it truly is important, and maybe if people are interested, we can have a topic on that as well. But I guess now, what else do I have planned? We can talk about like weird bird facts if you're interested in that. Let's see, I'm trying to think of a good one. I already told you about the turkey vultures, that they are immune to anthrax and botulism. But like a weird thing about turkey vultures too is the reason they're bald on their heads is when they're sticking their little heads into carcasses, they don't want the gore to come back with them, so they've evolved to have bald heads, which I think is kind of funny. A really cool thing, or a thing people don't know about bald eagles, is they have, or when they're young, I think it's up to 2 years, their heads are brown. So you can tell a juvenile from an adult bald eagle based on where their head's brown, how much white is present, and then you can gauge about how old they are from just that. And then weirdly, parent or adult bald eagles will care for their children up to like 4 years, which is, to me, seems pretty excessive, but they are really big birds. So, I guess it makes sense. I haven't really delved too much into the lifestyles and of bald eagles, so maybe I'll have to look into that. But I just thought that was really interesting that they'll take care of their kids for 4 years, and by then they'll start losing the brown on their head and become what we think is a bald eagle. A lot of people will mistaken bald eagles for golden eagles, which we do have in the United States. They're not as common as bald eagles. But people will be like, oh my god, I saw a gold eagle, and it's like, you probably saw a juvenile Did you? Because the parents will usually hang out with their kids, so you'll usually see a juvenile with an adult. And recently, I was on the North Spit, right on the ocean, and there was 3 juvenile eagles standing in the surf. It was really weird. When I talked to some wildlife biologists, they made it sound like that wasn't very common. Like that sound like a normal behavior that we see. And it was just really neat that we walked up and there's these 3 eagles they weren't like in the waves, but like where the wave kind of comes in and it's just like a centimeter, like an inch or whatever of water. They're just like chilling out, standing in it. They weren't eating anything. I don't know. It was really cute and interesting. And I thought that was just a cool experience I had. I've seen a lot of cool birds out here. I've seen some barn swallows. Those are the ones that have the orange on their chest. They look very similar to swifts, about the same body shape. I'm pretty sure they're in the same family. I'm not 100% sure. Never really looked into it. And they were on the beach too. I didn't know they hung out on the beaches or even on the coast. And they were so cute. They were just hovering over the sand, picking up the sand fleas. And it was just so funny to watch these little tiny birds using the currents from the ocean, like the wind from the ocean. And you're just like, how do you do this? How do you survive? How strong the wind is and how little you are. Birds are so resilient. It's just so funny how little they are and just how much they put up with. Like hummingbirds, their lives are hard. They have to eat, like here's another weird bird fact. They have to eat every 15 minutes because their metabolism is so high. So they all migrate to warmer climates where there's places more food is abundant, but you'll see the Anna's hummingbird, very common in Oregon. They are the ones that have purple, ruby-throated, kind of magenta-y colored throats, and that's how you tell them apart. And then we have the Rufus, which is the orange-colored one. And they're hilarious, just how angry they are. They're very territorial all of them are very territorial, but those Rufuses will fight the Annas, and it's so funny to watch them, just like how you're so little, how can you be so angry? And they just make these little light cheeping noises, and you're just like, oh my god, how are you so angry? How do you live? It's amazing, but they have, at night, because they have to eat every 15 minutes, they have to go through, I don't know if it's actually considered true hibernation, but it's called torpor. So, true hibernation is where if an animal has to go to sleep for long periods of time where the food is less excessive in order to reserve or not use as many calories. Because they can drop their heart rate, lower their metabolism, and not use as many calories and survive that long winter. Like bats are true hibernators. Bears are not, because bears will wake up during their winter periods and actually like go get drinks of water and have their cubs during the winter, and they'll wake up for their cubs and go back to sleep. So they're not true hibernators. They do stock up for winter, like body fat, but they're not true hibernators because they wake up. Hummingbirds do true hibernation or torpor every night. They have to lower their body temperature, lower their metabolism so they can just survive through the night. And in the morning, they literally have to warm up. It takes them a little bit before they can actually go out and look for food. So their little body's got to warm up, and immediately they need to go find food. And I thought that was just crazy because their lives are so hard. To imagine having to eat every 15 minutes, and at night you literally have to like shut your body down just so you can make it through the night. I think we could have an episode, like I said, about backyard bird feeding. And people love feeding hummingbirds, and I think that'll be included in that episode whenever I get to it. I don't really have a schedule planned for this. I should have talked about this at the beginning, not in the middle of the show, about my plans. Because I am interning for the BLM right now. My schedule is pretty weird, and my time is very limited, and my energy is very limited. Just getting up and being out all day is very new to me. So I don't know how often I will do this, but I want to keep doing this, hopefully have a way to keeping, just show people what I'm up to, share my interests. Like, I'm not expecting this to blow up at all, because it's obviously not going to be very good quality, but just share what I love with the people I love, my family and my friends, and hopefully maybe share some information with them, even though they probably wish I would shut up about birds. But I'm mostly doing this for me, to give me something positive to do in my life and share what I love, because like I said, I went to school for outdoor recreation or recreation resource management, and I want to be an interpretive ranger. So the person, when you go to a park or just some kind of information area, that person who's like, got any questions, what do you want to know, takes you on a hike. And I want to talk a lot about birds. I hope I get an opportunity in my life. Right now, because I'm working with the snowy plovers, that's my job, is to patrol the area. And when I see people, either not always violating the closure, but people who are just in the area and be like, hey, how's it going? You want to hear about some birds? And hope they're like, yes, please. And then I'm going to have some like plover swag to hand out to people. But I'm so excited to do this. I get to ride ATVs on the beach. I just get to be on the beach. It's going to be great. I'm only a week into it and I'm already having a really good time, and I'm hoping it stays that way. But yeah, that will definitely be something we'll talk about after my 6 months is up. Talk about that, with like why they're listed, what I was doing out here, and what people can do, hopefully. But that's a long time coming. We have a lot of other topics we will be discussing before that, hopefully. But like I said, there is no schedule. There's no expectations for this podcast. Really, it's just me talking at you for a while and hoping that you learn something. I'm not very good at writing scripts, so we're going to be all over the place. I have a piece of paper here right now with me, and I have not done a very good job staying on topic. But I guess back to like weird bird facts. Trying to think. Maybe we'll have an episode on, weirdly again, a controversial topic, that birds are dinosaurs. We've lived for a very long time believing that dinosaurs are all descendants, or are the ancestors of reptiles, which is true of some dinosaurs, but the family, I forget the scientific name for it, but it's the family that has the Tyrannosaurus rex, and raptors are the first birds, really. And that dinosaurs, a lot of those kind of dinosaurs probably had feathered bodies, actually, at some point. And because feathers aren't easily fossilized, we didn't know this for a really long time, but we found I always mess up those names, like Archidactyl or something like that was the first fossilized dinosaur that the feathers had been preserved. So you can see it's obviously covered in feathers. And so that was the movement that made people go, oh no, we don't know as much as we thought. And these renditions of dinosaurs are not as accurate as we had hoped. So now we're still finding fossils. I believe they found one somewhere in China with a bird, and I don't know how they know, but the feathers they found had like this chemical makeup of iridescent. So like hummingbird feathers. So they believe this dinosaur had this similar coloration of like hummingbirds, those shiny feathers that change color or whatever in the light as they turn. And I'm just so crazy about that. So it's kind of I feel like if you're a bird lover and you own birds, you are obligated to like Jurassic Park. I've seen so many people like on Instagram and on YouTube that I follow that are bird nerds who own parrots have Jurassic Park paraphernalia or like merchandise, and I'm no exception to that. I own a couple Jurassic Park t-shirts. The Jurassic Park ride is my favorite at Universal, and I'm super excited to see it's being revamped for Jurassic World, even though I'm not a huge fan of Jurassic World movies, but I still like Jurassic Park. And they do mention in the very beginning of that movie that, I forget what the scientist's name is, but he's like, it's dinosaurs were actually birds, and this little kid's like, birds aren't scary. And he goes like, he's like, turkey, like a turkey, they were not scary. And it's like, could you imagine a 12-foot turkey though coming at you? And it has teeth, because dinosaurs obviously had teeth, and they didn't lose those until I think they started being able to fly. His teeth, I think the theory, I don't know if it's still the theory, is that teeth make you heavy. Teeth are pretty heavy, and if you're trying to get off the ground, you don't need them, or they're going to hold you back, and birds just evolved to just have these very strong beaks. Like, some of these birds will take your finger off. And I was talking to a coworker yesterday about it, and just like there's a bird called the cassowary, and I believe they live in either New Zealand or in Australia, and they're maybe like a 3-foot, 4-foot tall bird, and they don't look like that scary, but you look at their feet, and dear God, they have killed people. I don't know exactly how, but I could not imagine being kicked by one of these dudes. So birds are scary. I know quite a few people who are weirdly afraid of birds. I haven't figured out what it is. Some of them I know it's been bad experience with parrots, usually like cockatoos, because cockatoos are kind of crazy. Love them. Would never own one. But a lot of people are scarred by those poor birds. But it's just to have this kid be like, oh, birds aren't scary. Like a turkey. Just like, dude, I know a lot of people who are afraid of my parakeets. Like, let's be real. Birds as dinosaurs is terrifying, but I love it. And there's a lot of cool books on it. I have had the chance to get a hold of any. I have a couple bird books right now, and maybe if I get the time to read them and finish them, we'll do like a little mini book review on them and talk about what the topic of the book was and how I felt about it. I think maybe it'd be fun to do a review of The Big Year, because it's not the best movie. I definitely enjoyed it, but mostly because I was constantly looking out for birds and trying to see which ones I recognized and which ones I didn't. And the plot line actually was pretty good. But like talking about it, and maybe there's an article by the Audubon Society, which is a conservation group effort for birds. I can't remember what his name was, but his last name was Audubon, and he was a bird scientist or an ornithologist is what it's called. And he has a lot of beautiful watercolor paintings that he did in the field of birds, and was really one of the first big drivers for bird conservation. And Audubon had an article where they talked about the big year and kind of like comparing it to how realistic is it to bird watching culture, and what are the little things that people would pick up on that are technically inaccurate. And I think that might be fun to review it as like, oh, as a movie, like, was it good? And then as someone who is into birds, how enjoyable was it, and what did professional in the field think of the movie? I think that'd be interesting. I'm just like spitballing right now ideas of what people might be into listening. But I think I'm gonna make this episode a little shorter. I didn't really plan as well as I thought I had, but it's the first one, and we're coming up to about 40 minutes, so I was able to stretch it out. And no, podcasts are usually like a half hour to like an hour, but this is my first time, obviously, so it's up in the air. But I'm gonna thank you guys for listening. And you don't have to, so it means a lot to me that you came in and support this little hobby that I'm trying, because everybody has a podcast. Let's be real. Your grandma has a podcast. Your annoying bird enthusiast now has a podcast. You don't like it's hard to get people interested in what you're interested in. So I'm very thankful for the few people who are going to listen to this and indulge me. But I would also like to extend the question of, what would you like to hear in the future? Is there a topic that you're interested in that you want to hear, get a little more in depth to hear my opinion on? It could be like, hey, I see this bird in my backyard all the time. What's their story? Or like, ooh, I want to own a parrot. Like, which parrot should I own first? Or, oh, we're definitely going to have to talk about Alex, the African gray. He's one of my favorite bird celebrities in the science community. And we might have either dedicated a whole episode to him or tack that on with, should we own, or like, is owning a parrot good for you? And because it talks a lot about their intelligence and knowing, like, we didn't know about how smart birds are, especially parrots. So it might get its own episode just because I love Alex so much, or it might just be tacked on to that episode since it's kind of like or it's on topic, but a little detour on topic. But yeah, what do you guys want to hear? Or are you just kind of here for the ride and fine with whatever crazy stuff I come up with? And also, what is your favorite bird? And what do you like about birds? Tell me what your favorite bird is, even if it's just like a bird. I love seeing little house sparrows just sitting outside, and I love watching, I like the seagulls because I saw a funny video of one tap dancing. Like, I don't care what your reason is, I want to hear it. Comment down below and wherever I post this and tell me. And I'm thinking about like highlighting comments too. So at the beginning of an episode being like, so-and-so said this or had this question, and we'll tackle that in the first episode or in the beginning of the episode if that's something that happens. Or in acknowledging, like kind of nerding out at the beginning about what do you like or what did you find really interesting about that topic. So yeah, leave me what your favorite bird is and why. Like, what is it that you love about that bird? And what do you like about birds? It doesn't have to be super in detail. Just be like, I love birds because they exist, and I'm going to be right on, homie. I'm right there with you. But yeah, please leave a comment, just anything, what you liked about this episode. I would love to engage you guys besides just talking at you. I want to talk with you and have a conversation at some point. And that's all I can think of, honestly. I guess the takeaway of this episode is this is a Squeaky Beepers is a podcast about birds by a bird nerd. And not necessarily for bird nerds, just for everybody. Just spreading that love for an animal that we see every day and is just kind of a silent passenger in our lives, and that we don't put a lot of thought into sometimes. We just see them and it's like, cool, pigeon. But it's like, pigeons, did you know the rock pigeon is actually, or the pigeon that you see, the little gray one everywhere, it's actually the rock dove. And excuse me. And the reason we see them so much in cities is because these guys perch on rocky cliffs for their nests. And when we came and started building cities, we eliminated a lot of their habitat. And to show how smart and just enduring these birds are, they're very adaptive. They just were like, cool, you made a habitat for us with these concrete buildings, and predators are less prevalent now because people are everywhere. There's food everywhere, even though it's not always super good for them. We made the perfect home for the rock pigeon or the rock dove. So, like, they're just everywhere. That's why you see them everywhere. And bet you didn't know that how amazing, how much of survivors these guys are. But that's my last little tidbit for this episode. Thank you again so much for watching Squeaky Beepers, and hopefully I will see you guys next time. Bye!